Latin America and the rest of the world. It is colorful and chaotic. It is explosive and entertaining. It is comic and tragic sometimes. The Latin Americans have very colorful expressions. When I reached Latin America for the first time in 1996, I reached Sao Paulo in Brazil. I was invited to give a lecture. It was my first one. So I asked the organizer, how much time should I speak? This naughty, mischievous Latin American looked at me and said, Senor Consul, time doesn't matter. We don't attach importance to time in Latin America. But just to make sure that your speech is like a mini skirt. I was puzzled. My first time in Latin America. So I looked at him very sheepishly and said, Amigo, can you please explain to me? He said, the speech should be like a mini skirt, short enough to arouse interest, but sufficiently long enough to cover the area of interest. That is when I lost my Indian innocence in the selective Latin America. They say politics is the art of the possible. Now in Latin America, everything is possible. Revolutions and banana republics. Drug lords and civil wars, and even soccer wars. Removal of president by street protests and aerial bombardment by their own country's air force, or by legislative impeachment, or by judicial coup. Turns, left, right, up, down, boom, and bust. Latin American politics has got everything. Even love has become politics there. There is a Nicaraguan politician, Rosario Murillo. She has written a poem. The title is Amar es combatir. In Spanish, it means love is to combat. Amar es combatir. Now, this Rosario Murillo is the president of the Foundation for Promotion of Love, Combat Love. And she is the vice president of the Nicaraguan Republic. And more importantly, she is the wife of Daniel Ortega, president of Nicaragua. Poor guy. He would be having a tough time at home, managing combat love. Now, to understand Latin American politics, you have to look at their history, culture, and literature. I'll give a glimpse of that. You know, US and Canada on the one hand, and Latin America on the southern side, they started off at the same time by the same Europeans who went there and also came here. But today, US and Canada are advanced, prosperous, stable, and you have Latin America, crazy, chaotic. The reason is the difference in the people who went there, the value systems and culture they carried. Those who went to US and Canada, they were rebels. They left their countries where there was religious restriction. They wanted to go and start a new life. But those who went to Latin America, they were the royalists and Catholics. They wanted to just establish the same status quo as it was in Spain and Portugal. Same hierarchy, same feudal system. Those who went to US and Canada, they went with their tools, plows, machines to start agriculture industry. Those who went to South America, they went with their swords and the cross. They didn't believe in work. Those who went to US and Canada, they went with their family, wives and children. But those who went to Latin America were bachelors. So they made the whole region of Latin America as a place for bachelors' party. Once I asked a Venezuelan friend of mine, when I met him for the first time, are you married? He looked at me again with that naughty, mischievous Latino smile and said, más o menos. Más o menos. Which means more or less. And they used to tease me, saying that you Indians believe in one wife and many gods. Those who went to North America, US and Canada, they had this business model called customer is king. So you make products to satisfy the customer and get profit. But in Latin America, it was the reverse. The king was the customer. The Spanish king and the Portuguese king told their people, go to Latin America, make money, do whatever you want. Agriculture, mining, trading, smuggling, but 20% to me. It was the empire of 20%, 20% empire. So that culture of corruption has been institutionalized. Once there was an Argentine minister had visited India. He had official discussions, signed agreements. In the evening, our minister had invited him to his home for dinner. And the Argentine minister found that the Indian minister's house was very nice, very elegant. And so, with this typical naughty Latino smile, he asked, amigo, how did you make this house? So our minister said, come here, come to the window. So walk to the window. You see that 8 lanes highway there? The Latin American, the Argentine saw that. I see only 4 lanes. Next time, our minister had gone to Argentina. Same thing happened. Official meetings, signing of agreements, evening dinner in the Argentine minister's house. And that house was even a bigger mansion, more luxurious, more opulent. So our minister, it was his turn to ask, amigo, what is your secret? So the Argentine called our minister, come to the window. Do you see that 4-lane express highway? Minister, no, I don't see anything. I know many of you get frustrated with the corruption in Indian politics. I say that the corruption in India is retail corruption. Over there it is wholesale. The culture, the Latin Americans have a unique culture where they live for the moment. Don't remember yesterday, don't think about tomorrow. There is an Argentine pop song which goes like this in Spanish. Celebra la vida, segundo a segundo. Nada se guarda, todo se brinda. It means celebrate life, second to second. Don't hold anything. Give out everything. Celebrate life. They have this other song. No me preguntas más. Déjanos imaginar que no existe el pasado. Que nacimos al mismo instante en que nos conocimos. It means, don't ask me anything more. Let us imagine that the past did not exist. Let us imagine that we were born the day we met. Very romantic. And they have the same macho Argentine. Yes, another song. No te prometo amor eterno, porque no puedo. Soy un cazador de mariposas, tripulante de navío. Again, same macho boy and the girl. So the boy says, don't ask me for eternal love. Don't ask me for eternal love because I cannot give. I am a hunter of butterflies, flyer in the clouds. And the Latin Americans think that their culture is the most advanced culture in the entire civilization. Someone explained to me. In the beginning, there was Moses who stood on top of the mountain and put his hands up and said, God, you are omnipotent, you are everything. Then after some time, King Solomon came. He put his hands here. Man, use your head. You can solve problems. Then came Jesus. He put his hands here. Heart, love thy neighbor. World will be better. Then came Karl Marx. He put his hands here. Man, if this is empty, there will be revolutions. And then came Sigmund Freud. So the Latin Americans say that they are in the Freudian stage. And in the Latin American world vision, an ideal world, a heaven would be a place where the British are, where the Germans are technicians, French are cooks, British are policemen, Swiss are financial managers, and Latinos as lovers. But the world will become hell if The British become cooks. The French become technicians. And the Germans become policemen. The Swiss become lovers. Very boring. And the Latinos becoming finance managers. The world will go bust the next day. Let's look at the literature. You all heard of magical realism? Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Maria Vargas Llosa, Isabel Allende. Now, magical realism is blurring of the line between fantasy and facts, imagination and reality. There is a novel by Maria Vargas Llosa. It's called as Aunt Julia and the Script Writer. The story goes like this. There is this 16-year-old boy. He lives with his parents. One day, his aunt gets widowed. She's about 35 years old. And she comes to stay in his house. She's very depressed. So his parents tell him, please, you take the aunt to the park or the cinema, or theater to give company, to help her to get out of depression. He doesn't like it, and he takes her out, and she treats him like a kid. And he's frustrated. But then, because his parents force him to do that, he does it. And when he does it, the inevitable happens. The boy falls in love with his aunt, who's double his age. So he declares his love to the aunt. But the aunt looks at him and says, kid, you're crazy. You don't know how to work. You will be ostracized. Forget it. But he persists. He says, no, I am in true love. It goes on. He keeps persisting with this. And then one day, the aunt looks at this boy and says, come on, you're a young boy, I am an old woman. Tomorrow you will meet another young girl and change your mind. He says, no, I will not. Then she asks him, suppose, hypothetically speaking, suppose we marry. How long do you think we can live happily as married couple, given the other problems and challenges? So this 16-year-old boy, he doesn't think. He says 2 years. And the aunt jumps and hugs him and says, hey, 2 years? Fantastic. 2 years of happy life is enough. Let's get married. But because he's a minor, he cannot get married in Lima. No priest will marry him. So they elope, they go to a rural place, give drinks to the priest and get him to marry. And when they come back home, the father is there with a gun. Don't enter the house. Now, when I read this one, I thought it was one of those crazy Latin American novels. Then I came to know that this was the actual story of the author Mario Vargas Llosa. It was his real life. In fact, when he stood in the presidential elections as candidate in Peru, people made fun of him, the guy who goes after aunties. And of course, he lost the elections. But there was another writer in Latin America who won the election, Daniel Ortega. There is a book by Salman Rushdie called Jaguar Smile. This is about Nicaragua. And in this book, he says, In Nicaragua, every street has a poet. Everyone is a poet or writer unless proven to the contrary. So Daniel Ortega, the president, is a writer. His wife, Rosario Murillo, is a writer. His brother is a poet. In his cabinet, there were about 7-8 poets and writers. But again, Daniel Ortega, true to the magical realism, he does something which you and I can't understand. The Marxist of Marxists, the leftist of leftists in Latin America, he does not recognize communist China. He recognizes Taiwan because he has sold his Marxist soul to Taiwanese dollars. That is magical realism. Recently, I wrote an article. The title of the article is Creation of Poverty Out of Prosperity. The story of magical realism in Venezuela. Well, Venezuela is in the news these days. But let me tell you briefly the story. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, much more than Saudi Arabia. And they have minerals, they have agriculture potential, hydroelectric power, very pleasant climate, and more interestingly, a lot of Miss Worlds and Miss Universe. They have more than any other country in the world. And the country was rich and prosperous. And it still has the potential to be one of the richest in the world. They were so rich and prosperous. You remember that supersonic aircraft called Concorde? The only city in Latin America where Concorde flew was Caracas. So the Venezuelans used to go for lunch to Miami and dinner to Paris. They had a great time. And there was political stability. It was like the American system. They had two parties. They alternated in power. But they were clever. They shared the spoils. And they robbed the country clean. And when the oil price went down, the money went out to Miami and the poor people were stuck. And there were about 30% of the people who were still poor. So in 1992, there was a riot in Caracas called the Caracazo. And after that, Chavez tried a military coup. It was a revolutionary. But he was caught, was put in jail, and then they gave him amnesty. And then later, when in the elections in 1998, Chavez was a candidate in the elections, and he had a simple slogan which said, "Oh, Venezuela is a very rich country. We have the largest oil reserves in the world. But why are you guys are poor?" So people voted for him. All the poor people, the masses, they voted for him. He came to power. I was there at that time in 2000. And I admired him. He was a real revolutionary. He had a lot of pro-poor policies. He minimized the exploitation. And he was admirable. And in the subsequent elections, the other two parties which were ruling the country for 50 years, they were completely decimated, demoralized. So they refused to participate in any further election. So his party participated and got majority and changed the constitution, did everything he wanted. So the opposition, since it found itself unable to challenge him constitutionally and democratically, they did what the Latin American oligarchs do. They went to the big brother in North America. They did a coup in 2002. They overthrew Chavez, put him in jail. But the oligarchs were so greedy. The interim president was a businessman called Carmona. And they were fighting amongst themselves. Who would become oil minister? Who would become finance minister? And they forgot the military, which helped them to overthrow Chavez. And then 48 hours after that, the military people found that they didn't get any share in this. So why serve these oligarchs? So let's bring back our man. So they went and brought Chavez back. He came back to power. When Chavez came back, he said, I will teach a lesson to everyone. He started systematically destroying business, industry, rich people, middle class people who didn't vote for him. He put in so many controls on foreign exchange, in nationalized industries, and completely ruined the country. Now, when he died, Maduro took over, and Maduro is not his own man. Chavez was very intelligent, smart, and he knew how to arouse the people, how to handle the Americans. But Maduro is just handpicked by Cubans. When Chavez was there undergoing treatment in Cuba, and that's where he died. So this guy is clueless and is incompetent. And the people around him, they want to make as much money as possible. They know the time is very short. And the economy is in shambles. There is so much of crime. They have inflation of 1,000,000%. And do you know what is 1,000,000% inflation? If you keep in your pocket 100 bolivars today, tomorrow it will be only 95 bolivars. Just by keeping it in your pocket. So the Venezuelans, when they go to the bar, they order 3 beers. Because if they order 1 beer and finish it and go for the next one, the price would have gone up. And they say, there is one thing common between India and Venezuela. You can never say accurately the exact inflation of Venezuela or the population of India. By the time you finish the sentence, both would have gone. Now, the politics of Latin America, as I said, has got everything. Has got revolution, dictatorship, religion, race, gender, and drugs. Now, revolution, well, you all know about Che Guevara. Che Guevara was the real, true, iconic revolutionary hero. Because many revolutionaries in the world, they changed after getting power. They became rich, or they shared power and wealth with their families. But Che Guevara did not seek power, did not seek money, did not seek comfort. He was an asthmatic patient. In between shootings, he would take his inhaler. And he was given the post of Minister of Industries or Governor of Bank of Cuba. But he was restless. He wanted to fight. He wanted to be a guerrilla. And he was a truly global revolutionary. He is, remember, he is an Argentine. The Argentines have the biggest ego in Latin America. And they care the least for others. Che Guevara is an Argentine. And then he went in his motorcycle. You might have seen this film, Motorcycle Diaries. and he saw the inequality, disparity, the treatment to Indians, that changed his mind. He was a doctor, but he left it and he went to Guatemala in 1954. In Guatemala, in 1954, they had elected a leftist government who wanted to do land reforms, take land from the United Fruit Company, which made it as a banana republic, and distribute the land to the masses. But then the US intervened. They overthrew him and put in a dictator. So he escaped from Guatemala, went to Mexico, and that's where he met Fidel Castro. He joined him, joined the Cuban Revolution, fought, and then in Cuba, he was restless. He wanted to go and fight, and Castro sent him to Angola. He went and fought there, came back, and then still he was restless, and he was sent to Bolivia. When he was sent to Bolivia, it was just a death wish. Everyone knew there was no way the Bolivian peasants were going to rise up. There was no conditions in Bolivia for revolution to succeed. But he still went and embraced that death. So that's why Che Guevara is a true global revolutionary in the world. Well, of course, you have the legendary Fidel Castro, but Fidel Castro was more pragmatic. He held power and he withstood the United States, and he did develop the country. Today, you don't have poverty. You have one of the best health care. Cubans are advanced in niche areas of science and technology and medicine. And they have but the only problem in Cuba is that, it's like the old Soviet Union, queues and shortages because they don't have enough foreign exchange, so day-to-day life is miserable. But then the Cubans, like Indians, they say, when you go through a revolution, the only problem is the first 100 years will be difficult. Afterwards it will be paradise. So they're counting the years. This revolutionary spirit of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro is continuing in residual ways with other political leaders. For example, in Uruguay in 2008, there was a president who was elected. His name is Jose Mujica. Jose Mujica was part of a guerrilla group, fought against the dictatorship. He was imprisoned for 14 years. And for 2 years, he was put in a well, dry well. There's a movie about it. And Mujica says that is when he learned how to speak to frogs. And, after democracy was opened, dictatorship was removed, he was elected as president. But during the election campaign, there was a lot of this rightist rhetoric that this guy, who was a guerrilla, who had robbed banks and who had lived with the frogs in the well, he might be crazy. He might want to take revenge. No. He forgot. He didn't want to take revenge. He forgave, and he was a pragmatic and respected president. And he refused to live in the presidential palace. He lived in his own little farmhouse. He drove a little Volkswagen himself. He refused security. He lived a very austere, non-ostentatious and non-Latino life. Now you have another president, President Obrador in Mexico. Now Obrador is a revolutionary light, like a Kingfisher Ultra. More pragmatic. He, like Lula, he fought the election twice. Now he won, he has become the president. And he has a lot of pro-poor programs and he's anti-rich, but he's more pragmatic. But he has also refused to live in the elegant presidential palace. He works out, he lives in his own apartment. There's a massive presidential plane for the Mexican president. He said, I will never step into the plane. Let's put it on sale. He goes in commercial flights in economy class. He has got rid of many of the security guards and said, people are my security. And he has reduced his salary. But that's a problem, because in Mexico, no one get more than the salary of the president. So all the civil servants also got their salaries cut. That is one other thing about talking about revolution in Latin America is that, I don't know if some of you know, that M. Roy, the founder of Indian Communist Party, one of the founders, he was also a founder of the Mexican Communist Party in 1920s, before he came to India. And he worked with the leftists in Mexico and with in Latin America and in US. He was a very respected figure. And when he had to travel incognito to Soviet Union for a Comintern conference, the Mexican government gave him a Mexican diplomatic passport to him and his wife to travel. So now we come to the politics of dictatorship. In Latin America, the oligarchs, the rich people, they had always favored dictatorship because they would keep the masses away from their wealth, because Latin America has the highest disparity of income and wealth in the world. But after the Second World War, during the Cold War, it was United States which encouraged, sustained and supported military dictatorships in Latin America. They overthrew democratic regimes. In Guatemala, in Chile, Dominican Republic, every country has a history of intervention. So once Michelle Bachelet, the ex-president of Chile, she said, you know the reason why there is no military coup in the United States? It's because there is no American embassy in Washington, D.C. And the dictatorships were terrible. They did all kinds of atrocities, killing and torturing people. And they have introduced a new word in the Latin American vocabulary. It's called desaparecido. It means disappeared. Once in a press conference, the media asked the Argentine president they gave a list of people and said, what happened to these people? This great general looked at the press and said, ni vivo ni muerto, simplemente desaparecido. He said, they are not alive, they are not dead, they just disappeared. That is the magical realism of dictatorship. There is this religion in politics in Latin America. You know, Latin America has the largest number of Catholics in the world, and Brazil is the largest Catholic country in the world. And during the Cold War, a lot of clergy members took to what is called as liberation theology. You heard of this? The clergy, they took the side of the poor. They said that is the best way of serving the Christ. And they fought against the dictators, against the oligarchy. is this famous Archbishop Romero in El Salvador, who was assassinated. He was part of this liberation theology. But one of the liberation theology bishops, he managed to become president of your country in Paraguay in 2008. He became president, and he had this socialist leftist program of pro-poor policies. He started well, but then a few months into his presidency, some woman gave an interview to media saying that I have a son from Fernando Lugo, the president of Paraguay. Fernando Lugo accepted responsibility. Sorry, I committed a sin. So he paid compensation. And some weeks later, another one came and said, I also have one. He didn't admit, he didn't deny. Then there was one more. And then there was a stream of these claims. So then the Paraguayans called him as the father of the nation. And they also said, even when he committed sins, he remained a true Catholic. He did not use condoms. But you know, despite all this, in any other country, the president would have been impeached, or he would have resigned. But he didn't resign, he was not impeached. You know the reason? Because nobody else had committed less sins than him in Paraguay. So they couldn't throw stones on him. This is a tradition there. In Paraguay, they have more women, fewer men. The reason for this was a war in the 1870s. It's called the War of Triple Alliance. This little Paraguay had a dictator who had the audacity to declare war against 3 countries, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay. He took all 3 on, and the Brazilians and the Argentines came with their military, they destroyed the country, killed 2/3 of the male population. So there's a shortage of males. So that's why the father of the nation was not impeached. But these days, the religion has taken another form in politics. It's not liberation theology, it is prosperity theology. The clergy tell the people, we will save your soul for 10% of your income. Evangelicals. So evangelicals are mushrooming across Latin America. In Brazil, over 30 million people have converted into evangelicals. And some of the evangelical pastors have become multimillionaires. And there is someone called Edir Macedo. He's a billionaire. He has got a private jet worth $40 million. He has got the bestseller book because he makes everyone to buy. He has got the bestseller music album. Owns radio stations, TV stations. And these evangelical, right-wing, conservative people, they were the ones who brought Bolsonaro, this extreme rightist called the tropical Trump, as the new president of Brazil. And this new president of Brazil and his foreign minister, Ernesto Araújo, he is even more than his boss. He says, God is back in Brazil. God through nation, nation through God. So, we pray to God, save Brazil. There is race in politics in Latin America. Before the Europeans went there were millions of native Indians, Aztecs and Olmecs and Incas across. Most of them were exterminated. The whites ruled the place. They colonized, conquered and ruled, and they controlled business, politics, everything. But even now, there are about 40 million native Indians across Latin America. And they are in a majority in two countries, Guatemala and Bolivia. But in Guatemala, they don't even publish population figures. Otherwise, the Indians will think that they are a majority and they would have political ambition. And Bolivia, again, where the native Indians are about 60% of the population, they were kept outside La Paz. They couldn't come anywhere near the Chamber of Commerce or the presidential palace. A kind of apartheid practice for the last 400 years. But for the first time, Evo Morales, a native Indian, Aymara Indian, he was elected as president in 2006. He's a leftist, nationalistic, but he manages the economy well. The country has been making economic growth of average 5% every year. He didn't screw up the economy like Chavez did. He's doing very well. His agenda is empowerment of the Indians. I had an occasion to meet him in La Paz when I visited him. Evo Morales hugged me and said, "Hermano, yo también soy indio." He said, "Brother, I am also Indian." Now, apart from the native Indians, there are about 140 million blacks across Latin America, of which in Brazil, there should be at least about 100 million. Brazil has more black population than the United States. It has the largest black population outside Africa. But in Brazil, there is no affirmative action, there is no compassion, nothing for the blacks. So they are kept outside politics and business. Then there are other minorities. Like for example, there are about 1 million people of Japanese origin in Sao Paulo in Brazil. They have the largest Japanese population outside Japan. But those Japanese are different from these serious Japanese from Tokyo. They are the Samba and Carnival Japanese. And one of these Japanese, not from Brazil, but from Peru, he became the president, Fujimori. You remember? Fujimori became the president of Peru. And he did something what even Latin American presidents had not done. When there were investigations against him, he was traveling in Japan at that time. And so the Congress sent him a mail saying that please come back. He sent a fax saying that I am resigning from presidency. It's something of a history in Latin American politics. A president sending a fax from another country saying I am resigning. Some other minorities have also come into power. Like there are large concentrations of Syrian Lebanese in many countries in Latin America. Carlos Menem, president of Argentina, is Syrian origin. Carlos Slim, the third richest man, Mexican, he is of Lebanese origin. And El Salvador has just elected a president called Bukele. He is of Palestine origin. Now we come to women in politics. You might have heard of Eva Peron. Don't cry for me, Argentina, Madonna. Evita. Now, Evita created a sensation in Latin American politics. She came from very poor, lower class, rural area in Buenos Aires province. She came to Buenos Aires city, she struggled, she was a radio artist, and then she was lucky to meet Peron, who was a colonel in the army. And he took a fancy to her because she was like a Latina, naughty and mischievous and challenging. She was not very pretty, but she was very interesting, very adventurous. So he took a fancy for her, continued, and then she started becoming more of a politician. She started giving speeches, she started writing, she started speaking in radio, and developed support for Peron. And when the Argentine military junta found that Peron has political ambitions, they wanted to detain him, put him in jail. But she aroused the masses with her fiery speeches, mobilized trade unions and people, and prevented the arrest. And then the rest is history. He became president. But she was running her own pro-poor policies like the Amma in your neighboring state here. And so every day, people, thousands of people will queue up in front of her house for food, favors. So she cultivated the poor people. But unfortunately, she died at the young age of 33 in 1952. But her dead body played even a more active role in politics. She died in 52, and the Argentines wanted to embalm her properly and find and build the largest monument. They wanted to go for unique designs. But the process got delayed, like in India, for 3 years, till 1955. For 3 years, her body was kept. And in these 3 years, there was a sort of hysteria in Argentina. At the exact time of her death, 8:20, the radio will announce, oh, this was the time Evita became Santa Evita. She became a saint. The school kids had to sing praise for her. Everything was Evita. The government took full advantage of her martyrdom. And in 1955, the military overthrew Peron, took over. And then the first order they proclaimed was, nobody should mention the name of Evita or Peron. They will be jailed. Not media, not in public speeches, her name should not be mentioned. But what do they do with the body? So they hid it secretly. And there was speculation, where is the body? So what they did was, they made 6 identical coffins and sent one to Switzerland, one to Germany, one to France, to confuse people. Then in 1970, there is this guerrilla group called Montoneros. They kidnapped a general called Aramburu and said, unless the body of Evita is returned, we will kill this general. And they didn't return the body, they killed the children. 1970. Still they were looking for a body. And in 1974, the same Montenegro guerrillas went to the grave of Aramburu, dug up the body and kidnapped the body and said, we won't return it unless we get Evita's body back. But fortunately the military regime fell at that time and they found the body which was in Switzerland and they brought it back. And now it is buried in Recollecta in Buenos Aires with a lock and key. Locked. The only coffin, the burial ground to be locked with so much of security. Now, after this Evita of 1950s, another woman tried to be like a Evita in Guatemala. Her name is Sandra Torres. She was the wife of President Alvaro Colón. In Guatemalan constitution, there is a clause which says, no children, brothers, sisters, or immediate relatives of the sitting president can contest in the elections to succeed the president, to prevent dynastic rule. She was the wife of President Alvaro Colón. So, but she had political ambition. She did like Evita. She called poor people, she was distributing things and doing favors and developing her constituency. But then there is this Guatemalan constitution, according to which she cannot contest in the elections immediately. So, what did she do? She divorced the husband. She divorced the husband 1 year before the elections and proclaimed, I am the first woman in the world who has divorced her husband to marry the country, Patria. And she started her campaign. But the Constitutional Court of Guatemala, they put their foot down and said, Madam, what you are saying is technically correct. You have divorced your husband. But in the spirit of the law and constitution, it is not correct. So you cannot. So they did not allow her. So she lost her chance. But she participated in the elections the next time. By the time people forgot about it, she lost the elections. Now we come to the last part, the drug politics. Some of you would have seen Narcos, where Pablo Escobar is portrayed as the villain and the wretched DEA agent is the hero. It is pure fake news. It is a farce. It is an insult to the intelligence of everyone. I'll tell you the story of the drug politics. You know, in the 60s, during the Kennedy administration, to change the image of United States, they sent volunteers to work in developing countries as Peace Corps volunteers. They went all over the world, Africa, India, and some of them went to Colombia. And since they had a lot of time at their hands and they're young kids, they wanted to have fun. And they found this cocaine. They liked it. And then they told their friends back home, hey, it's nice. You get high. And they carried it, they liked it. And they said, get more. So then they talked to Escobar and company and said, can you help us? He said, why not? They got dollars. And it grew, and the drug lords became rich. And of course, they shared the money with the politicians. And the Colombian politicians, they thought, what the hell? If the gringos want to get high and get killed, Why not export what they need? So the drug business is a consumer-driven business. It is a demand-driven business. It is worth over $150 billion. Now, of this, for every $100 of business, $80 remains within United States. Only $20 come to Colombia, of which the coca leaf grower, he gets about $2, and the rest logistics in Colombia. It is purely demand driven. If the Americans don't consume, no one is going to waste their time in supplying this one. And if Colombia doesn't supply, they will take from Mexico. They will take heroin from Afghanistan. Now they are taking synthetic drugs from China. But I think it's a sweet revenge for China, because the British, they were the original drug traffickers. They took opium from India to China, imposed on them. So it is the Chinese revenge on the Western world by supplying synthetic drugs. Now, this is not only a business, but it is also illogical. You see, the Americans say that Colombia and Mexico supply, you must stop the production. Fine. But for every kilogram of cocaine which goes into United States, there is a gun coming from United States into Latin America. And dollars coming. Now in the whole Mexico City, if you want to buy a gun, there is only one gun shop for 20 million people. You go to the border, it's dotted with dozens of gun shops. You can buy 4 or 5 as many as you like. And the dollars keep coming. And dollars are managed by HSBC, Bank of America. Now, if you say that you should stop at your side, you should also stop the smuggling of guns and dollars. They don't do that. And if you say that it is because of the production that people get addicted, then you should stop the production of guns, which kill more people not only in Latin America, even within the United States. So it is completely illogical. But the American media and the administration has managed to brainwash the whole world to believing that the Colombians and the Mexicans, they are the villains. Now you know what is fake news. Well, the other day I was talking to somebody here. I asked him, what do you know about Latin America? He said, drugs. But there are also some positive things from Latin American policies to inspire the rest of the world. One of the things is Costa Rica. Costa Rica abolished its armed forces in 1948, voluntarily, not like the Japanese or the Germans. They did it voluntarily. They said, instead of using our scarce resources for guns and ammunition, we will use it for books and medicines. They abolished the armed forces, so there are no military coups. And they have a University of Peace to disseminate peace. Even Indian students go there. And Costa Rica has remained as an island of peace in this hell called Central America, particularly the northern triangle of violence, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, which are the highest murder rates in the world. But Costa Rica has remained as a peaceful island. But it is not just passive peace. The Costa Ricans took initiative to bring the civil war to an end in Central America. Oscar Arias, the president of Costa Rica, got a Nobel Prize for brokering peace and bringing peace for Central America. And not only in peace, Costa Rica is a global leader in this climate change. They produce something like about 99% of their power through renewable energy. And the new president who has just been elected, he has promised by 2021, Costa Rica would become a carbon neutral country, the first in the world. They will not use diesel or petrol for cars. Everything will be electric. And they are a pioneer in ecotourism. This is something for the rest of the world to get inspiration, this little country, Costa Rica. Then, of course, we should also learn, particularly India, from the Guatemalan constitution, how to prevent dynasties in politics. The third thing is, in 2012, Enrique Peña Nieto was elected as the president of Mexico. But he was elected in July, but he took over power on 1st of December. But in Latin America, they are very clever. You see, they give a lot of time gap between election and assumption of power, so that the other guys can clean up the treasury. But Nieto used this time to do something unique. What he did was, Mexico very desperately needed reforms in their labor, education, energy, because the Congress wouldn't allow reforms, like in the US. So what he did was, as soon as he got elected, he called the other two major parties, sat with them, negotiated, and identified what are the basic reforms to be done for Mexico, going beyond the party politics and ideology. They identified about a dozen reforms to be done. They signed an agreement the day before he assumed office as president. And then, in a matter of about a year and a half, he implemented all those reforms. It is called Mexico Pact. This is something amazing, particularly in a Latin American country, where a ruling party sat with the opposition before the election, agreed on the essential fundamental reforms, and did it. Even New York Times and Washington Post wrote articles telling their guys in Washington, D.C., maybe we have something to learn from them. And the fourth thing, which is a lesson for politics in India and the rest of the world, and Brazil, this Operation Car Wash scandal, you might have read about it in the newspapers. Billions of dollars were stolen by executives and businessmen in big contracts with Petrobras, the oil company. But there was judicial activism. There was a prosecutor judge called Sergio Moro, US educated. He introduced plea bargaining in the Brazilian law. So what he did was, he just arrested the top business tycoons, the top executives, put them in separate jails and make deals. You tell me about the other guy, I will be lenient. He went to the other guy and asked about him and did deal. With this, I mean, this is something revolutionary in the world of democracies in the world. In a very short span of time, over 100 political leaders, including the president, ex-president Lula, and the president of the lower house of the Congress, and the president of Odebrecht. It's something like Reliance. Huh? They've all been put in jail. Not only that, they have brought the money stolen from the corporations from Switzerland. They already brought over $400 million from Swiss banks. It has come to the Brazilian treasury. We keep talking about Indian money in Switzerland. We only talk. They brought the money, and even within Brazil, they went after the bank accounts and they brought money back. And this is something unique which has happened in Latin America, and now this movement has spread across Latin America, and it has tempered and moderated the politicians to think twice before doing things. Anyway, I will end my lecture with one lesson for India from my favorite Brazil. During Lula's time, when Brazil was riding high, resisting US imperialism and claiming leadership of Latin America, permanent membership of UNSC, and also be one of the global leaders. The Brazilians were riding high, and I asked my Brazilian friend, hey guys, how do you manage this big brother? He told me this story. There was an American from Texas, oil tycoon. He visited Rio de Janeiro. He went to Copacabana beach and saw a pretty young Brazilian girl. Fell in love and courted her and proposed marriage. Married and took her back to Houston. And back. So when they reached Houston, the tycoon, whose head went wobbly in the beach of Copacabana, then regained his composure, became the Texan tycoon again. And he called his wife, said, come and sit on the table. I want to explain to you the 3 Texan rules of our marriage. So the Brazilian girl said, si, senor, please, go ahead. Rule number 1, I am the boss. Si, senor. Rule number 2, whatever I do, wherever I go, no questions. So the Brazilian girl said, si, senor, no problem. Rule number 3, as and when I come back drunk after 3 in the night or 4 in the morning, the food should be ready, warm, on the table, and you should be there to serve me. So the Brazilian girl didn't blink, si, senor, no problem. Then the Texan asked, now tell me, you want any clarification, any comments? You have anything? So the Brazilian girl, she said, senor, you have put 3 big conditions, Texan conditions. I have one small Brazilian condition. Go ahead, what's that? She says, you see the bedroom there? There will be sex every night at 10 in the night, whether you are there or not. Thank you very much.